Welcome to another edition of the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN. I'm your host, Femi and Michael. Michael, you are back in New Jersey, buddy. How was your time out west?
It was long, man. It was long. I was like living out of a suitcase. You know, when you wake up in the room and you don't know where the hell you are half the time, you know? And so, yeah, it was long. It was good to be back. It was good to be good to see everybody on the trip. Good to see you sit there at the Circa with the great Bill A.D. and Derek Stevens as we pondered the world, you know? I mean, it was awesome. But I didn't see Stephen Bond. He was down in Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. I mean, I think he must – it's like Batman. Once he slides down that pole when he's off on Monday, he's headed that way, right?
Yeah, he's got his obligations out in California. So, you know what? I mean, we can't blame the guy. He's got to be in two places at once sometimes here. I
would have loved this. They should have like an amusement where you could slide down the pole and go from Bruce Wayne into Batman. I mean, wouldn't you love to do that? Like two things I would love to do. I would love to dunk. Like, I would love to have a legitimate be able to dunk, and two, slide down the bat pole. Those would be the two things I'd want to do.
Hop into the phone booth like Superman, you know? You can do that. Being able to dunk, though, it would be a fun thing to do, which I was close to doing that in high school. Haven't gotten close since. But that's neither here nor there.
I was never close, just for the record. I'm sure that's going to shock everybody that listens to this podcast.
And we're not going to get you in the vertical at the Combine next February. As always, make sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Tweet at us. You can find Michael at MLombardiNFL. You can find me at Femi and Our producer, Stephen Bond, with us, as always, on the ones and twos. But Michael, before we get into all the football, the breaking news in sports is that one of the potential rookies of the year in the NBA is now gone for the entire season. Chet Holmgren suffered a Liz Frank injury up in my neck of the woods in Seattle, playing in a Pro-Am game, and it's tough news for OKC.
It's horrible for OKC. But, I mean, look, I think this guy is – you know, when I was first starting at the 49ers in 1984, our first draft, we drafted this kid named Todd Shell, a linebacker from BYU. Mm-hmm. And he came in and he was always hurt. So the players nicknamed him. They called him Crystal Shell. And the reason they called him Crystal was he was always broken. And so he couldn't be called Glass because Glass wasn't expensive. Crystal was. So they called him Crystal because he was so expensive. His contract at that time, which we would laugh at today at how cheap it was. Mm-hmm. So he was Crystal Shell. And he stayed hurt most of his career, you know, and never really amounted to what we thought he would become. But, you know, when I see Holmgren, I think he's going to be Crystal.
You know what? If that's the case, Oklahoma City – tough situation for them. Chet Holmgren is 7 feet tall, has a very thin frame for the folks who don't really
thin. I mean, I'm fatter than him. I mean, like, seriously, and I'm 5'11". I mean, like, come on. I mean, how's he going to hold up? Seriously. I mean, his first NBA game, he's going to have bruises all over his body.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. He was a number 2 overall pick in this past summer's draft here. And he joins a list of guys in the NBA like Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Blake Griffin, who were injured and didn't play in their rookie season. So it's a tough break, literally and figuratively, for Chet Holmgren there, who suffered that Liz Frank injury in his right foot. But let's get to the football here, Michael. That's why everybody came and listened to this podcast. Jimmy Garoppolo is currently with the San Francisco 49ers, but we know he's practicing off to the side, not really a part of the team, but technically he is on the roster. You have some news to share on the latest with Jimmy G.
I keep asking teams all the time, why don't they just cut Jimmy G now? Mm-hmm. And the answer that I got back from multiple teams is they don't want him to go to Seattle. And I said, well, how interested is Seattle in Jimmy G? And he said, oh, they're very interested in him. So for all the talk about Geno, for all the talk about Drew Lock, I think Seattle knows they're going to get Jimmy G. And I think San Francisco knows that he could go there. So they're trying everything in their power to prevent that. And right now they have no takers. So what I think will happen is the Friday before the opening weekend, I think they'll cut Jimmy G. I think that's when they'll cut him. And then he'll have to go do his contract and go up to Seattle and go there. But there is no interest in allowing Seattle to even have a week preparation with Jimmy G to come as their starting quarterback. But I do believe, reliably reported to me, that Seattle is the team that wants him. And for all the talk about Geno and Locke, no, I think they have their eyes on Garoppolo.
That's interesting because last week on the podcast, I told you that I spoke with my boots on the ground out in my old neck of the woods in Seattle, and I asked about Garoppolo, saying that would they be interested when he's eventually cut by the Niners? And the response was probably, yeah, Jimmy G is significantly better than Geno. And I responded, I said, I just wonder how soon he'd be able to start since he's probably not getting cut for a couple of weeks. He said that, yes, the Jimmy G thing is tricky even before you get to the salary part. So you think that this is just because the Niners don't want him to be able to play in that Week 2 game where they're hosting the Seattle Seahawks later this season?
Bingo. And the longer that they can prevent that, the better off they feel like the chances of him playing will not happen. And look, I don't think it's anything they have against Jimmy. There's no market. And, I mean, is there going to be a market after this weekend? Is anybody playing anybody this weekend? I don't know. No. Even if you play your guys, 5-10 plays at the most. So is anybody going to really be calling? I mean, they're not going to get any offers now. And so they want to make it as difficult as they possibly can because they know he's going to end up in Seattle, at least as of right now. Now, we know there's no absolutes in football. Things could change. But for right now, that's why they're holding on to him. That's why they're doing all this, is to keep him from playing in that Week 2 game against them. I mean, that's the last thing you want to do is cut your guy and then go up there and then your guy doesn't play good, and the guy you cut plays well.
A month from today, the Seahawks will be hosting the Atlanta Falcons in Week 3. Who's going to be their starting quarterback for that game?
Can we get DraftKings to put? I would bet Jimmy Garoppolo.
Okay. Wow, you would bet Jimmy Garoppolo.
Even though he's not on the roster. I mean, if DraftKings has that prop, I would bet that. I seriously would bet that because I think that's what's going to happen. I mean, I think that's where he's going. I mean, look, it's no secret that they've been holding out, And I think because of that, it's going to work out. I think they're going to end up getting him because where else is he going to go? Where else can he go?
Mm-hmm. I don't see where else he can go. Cleveland sounds like they're ready to go with Jacoby Brissett, I should say. The New York Jets situation, that ended up not being a season-long injury, so Zach Wilson should take over as the quarterback at some point. In a game of musical chairs, there's not a whole lot of chairs left to go around, so Seattle makes the most sense here if Jimmy G is going to be starting this season.
Right, and so also taper in the contract, right? So he's making, what, $24, $25 million? Mm-hmm. So if you say, there's a lot of teams, I'm sure, that would want him as the backup quarterback, but if you trade for him, you've got to agree to a contract that's a backup contract. So that's a hard thing to do, right? And if Garoppolo knows he can get a starting contract in Seattle, he's not going to redo his contract. Don Yee's not a dumb guy. Don Yee's smart. He's sitting there saying, okay, San Francisco, you don't want to cut him, we'll wait. I'm not redoing a contract with any team you want to trade him to. So if they got $24 million to put on the cap, after these games this weekend, people are going to get their cap in order because it's no longer top 51. It becomes all your players count on the cap. So there's no way that somebody's going to take that on. Cleveland could do it. But Cleveland doesn't want to do it. So where's he going to go? It's not teams aren't interested. It's where does he fit the cap? Houston doesn't sound like they're interested. I mean, Yee has a lot of leverage because he's sitting there on $25 million. And unless he says yes to redoing the deal, they have to cut him.
Oh, that's fascinating. I'm looking at the Fox Bet odds. That's the last odds I was able to find for Jimmy G's next team. And this was as of August 10th. The Seahawks were the favorite, plus 250 to be Jimmy G's next team. The Houston Texans were 4-1, Giants plus 550, Buccaneers plus 850, Browns 9-1. So everybody kind of realizes that if there's a potential starting quarterback vacancy, it's up in Seattle. But with that said, Pete Carroll is talking about this Geno Smith, Drew Lock thing like it's still a quarterback competition because I understand Jimmy G is not on the roster, so he has to go about it that way.
Right.
But Drew Lock is going to be playing tomorrow night against the Dallas Cowboys. Maybe we see Geno Smith as well as this quarterback competition extends into September.
Yeah, I mean, look, what else can Pete say, right? Pete's got to be positive with the guys he's got. He's messaging to his own team. So I think ultimately, you know, that's what he can only say. But I do know reliably that that's where he wants to go. That's where they want Garoppolo, and they could get Garoppolo. Look, I think the Giants should make the move for Garoppolo. Now, I know, Daniel Jones played better. No, look, stop, please. We've had 38 games to watch Daniel Jones. Yeah. Enough is enough. Like, what are we going to do? And, I don't see, to me, if you're the Giants and you trade for and you get Garoppolo and you give up a 6th-round pick and you fit him into your cap. Now, I know they're tight on the cap. But you bring him in there and you kind of – now you have 16 games to evaluate him. I think when you become a GM of a team without a quarterback, you got to take as many chances on quarterbacks as you can until you hit. Until you hit. Like, take him and then, compare him to this draft class that's going to come out. What happens if you get into the draft and you don't really have that top pick, or you win too many games and you're not, what happens then?
Yeah. You said that you think Jimmy wants to go to Seattle. Does he have revenge on the mind, or is this maybe just the logical best scenario for him to be a starting quarterback?
I think probably it's a similar offense, with Shane Waldron, who came from the Rams, which is a similar offense to what Shanahan ran in Washington. So there's a lot of continuity in terminology. I think Jimmy wants to go to a place where he's going to learn that the language is the same. It's challenging, like when Brett Favre went from Green Bay to the Jets, it was a completely different language. It affected him a little bit. I think he wants to go where the language is going to be the same. Seattle would be the same language. Cleveland would be the same language. I think that matters more. Plus, he gets an opportunity. Look, if you're Don Yee and Jimmy Garoppolo, you want to go somewhere where you have a chance to get paid $25 million. If you go somewhere where you're not going to play. I mean, look at Baker had to take a pay cut this year off a guaranteed contract. You put yourself in a tough spot.
All right, Michael, I've been putting off this news for too long, but we have to get to it because it's big news with my beloved Dallas Cowboys. Their all-pro offensive tackle Tyron Smith, who made the blue chip list. We're doing this blue chip, red chip series. When we did the offensive tackles and the offensive line episode, Tyron Smith was a blue chip for the tackles, but he has suffered an avulsion fracture of the knee, which in layman's terms is the hamstring tendon that sits on the back of the knee pulling off the bone, so he's going to need surgery. If he's back at all this season, the earliest they're projecting is December. Sounds like it's a similar injury to what Mekhi Becton suffered last year that had him out for that entire rest of the season after that Week 1 game against the Panthers. Where does this leave Dallas here with Tyron Smith now out for the foreseeable future?
This is a hard thing to overcome. I think they're going to have to move Steele over to left tackle, he was playing right tackle right now. And then they've got to hope for one of these young players, whether it's Bell that they drafted in the 4th round or the kid they drafted in the 5th round, Watsiki or something like that. I forget how to say his name. They're going to have to play a young player at right tackle or try to find a right tackle. I think that's ultimately what they have to do. They have to put Steele at left. This is a hard injury for them. What we talked about when we talked about Smith, we said, look, he's a really good player. He just can't stay healthy. And I think a lot of their fortune of the season was on the left tackle. It's a hard injury to overcome. You lose your left tackle in the NFL, it's a hard injury to overcome. Green Bay's overcome it a little bit, but if it cost them in a playoff game, right?
Yep.
It's so challenging when you do that. So, they're hard to find left tackles. They're hard to replace. This, to me, shifts the odds. I really think this puts Philly as the favorite in the East. I really do. I think that this injury weakens the offensive line for the Cowboys significantly. I think it affects Prescott. It affects their run game. One of the things what I think people lose sight of with left tackles in football is when you have a left tackle that can run block, it sets a different tempo. Like the Patriots moved Trent Brown from right tackle last year to left tackle. Okay. And everybody said, why did they do that? They did that to run the ball left. They did that because it gives them a better chance to really dominate the line of scrimmage going to your left. When you play in the National Football League, most of the right ends, as you face the defense from behind, are light. They're not physical. And so they're good pass rushers, but they're not great run defenders. Yep. And if you get a run blocker, when Becton played left tackle for the Jets early in his career, and Gase was running the ball behind him, it was 6-7 yards almost every snap. So what happens is the defense almost has to rotate their defense behind their softer end. So if you're the Raiders and you're playing against Tyron Smith and Chandler Jones is not a great run defender, you got to kind of make your secondary come play, have a run support on that side. Well, that changes the whole tenor of the game. And if you can do that, and so the great left tackles, the Jonathan Ogdens, those guys that could run block, it's a different game. You lose that. Now all of a sudden, where are we going? It's a hard thing to replace. The Patriots are going to run the ball left because they're going to run behind Big Trent Brown when he feels like blocking somebody. So it's going to be a tough thing to do. And I think that this injury is hard. It affects him in the run game, and it affects him in the passing game as much. They won't be as physical. And I think, we had Brian Broaddus on the show on the Lombardi line a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about Dak Prescott about, when Dak can throw it, 30 times, he's a better player than when he has to put 40. Most quarterbacks are. I think this affects Elliott. I think it affects Pollard. I think it affects their running game as much.
Yeah, and here are the stats to back it up here from Paul Hembakaitis, the producer over for Get Up over at ESPN. The Cowboys rushing left since 2019, so running to Tyron Smith's side. When he's on the field, it's 5.4 yards per rush. When he's off the field, it's 4.3 yards per rush. That's a full yard less when Tyron Smith is off the field. Then also Dak Prescott in play action since 2019. His quarterback rating 78 when Smith is on the field, 47.2 when Smith is off the field. Like you mentioned, it's going to affect the run game and the pass game. And as a fan, Smith hasn't played since a full season since 2015. So I always wonder, why wasn't the team ready with some kind of contingency plan? Because he's been a guy who's been hurt over the last several years here. So it's almost to me like the front office maybe dropped the ball here.
Well, they did last year. Remember, they signed Ty Neshke. They thought he could be the swing tackle for them, and that didn't work out, right? So they've tried. I mean, they've tried to carry him. They've tried to manufacture it, but they've got areas where they've got some money going somewhere else, and they couldn't get to it. I think most fans misinterpret what a true great left tackle can do, because it's the run game. It's the run game that really helps, because most teams run the ball to their right. Most teams are right-handed. But when you can run left behind a really good left tackle, it opens up the entire game, and it forces the defense to do things. So, to me, I didn't know those numbers in terms of what you recited from Get Up, but to me, that's the value of when you get a left tackle that can run block. It's like Jimbo Elliott. Everybody said coming out in the draft when Jimbo Elliott was at Michigan State, he can't play left tackle. He doesn't have quick enough feet. Well, he can run block. And he's good enough to block the edge, and he gave that Giants that left side running game that they desperately needed. So I think there's a misconception about that.
Yeah, the first-round pick for the Dallas Cowboys, Tyler Smith, out of Tulsa, was supposed to be the left tackle in waiting when Tyron Smith eventually hung him up here.
They might have to kick him out.
They might
kick him out and put McGovern in there. I mean, they could do that too. Now, I thought Tyler Smith is getting better. I mean, he can't hold. It's a tough challenge to go as a young player to go in there and play at left tackle. But, they may have to do that. The guy's big enough. He's 6'6". I mean, he's over 6'5", right? So he's big enough. He's got enough arm length. I'm just trying to look up his arm length at the combine here. He is
he's physical,
34 arm, 10 hand, 30 and 10 3/4 hand. Oh, fuck. He's got those big hands, Femi. Oh, that's just what I want. That's just what I want. You see the mitts, Femi, the weapons. When you have a hand like that, they're fucking weapons. That's what he would say.
Yeah, there you go. He's got those heavy hands that can move people here. But the Patriots, there's been rumors about them potentially shopping Isaiah Wynn. Do the Cowboys maybe call up your buddy Bill and maybe get themselves a left tackle who has some experience?
I think if Bill felt like his tackle situation was improved, was good enough, then he certainly Wynn. He's got to ask himself the question, do I play Wynn this year and let him go, or am I going to re-sign him, or do I let him go and get something really valuable back? Because there's probably a good chance Wynn goes into the free agent market and Bill would get a compensatory pick. So those are the kind of decisions you've got to make.
Yeah,
those are what you kind of have to look at. So, but to me, Dallas. Look, if I'm Dallas, I'm going to put Smith over at left tackle for right now. He's 6'4", he's big enough, 324 pounds. He ran 5.02 at the combine. He's got all these things going for him. Put him over there, live with him. You got to help Chip. You got to help him out. We might as well get on with. If we drafted him to be the left tackle of the future future is now.
Yeah, unfortunately, he hasn't been training at left tackle since the mini camp in June, so it's going to have to be a crash course over the next 2 weeks since the season gets going on September 11th. But we're going to take our first break here. On the other side, we'll continue the Blue Chip, Red Chip series in the kicking game with the kickers. The Blue Chip, Red Chip series continues, Michael, and we've made our way to the kickers and the punters. We're going deep dive. We're not ignoring the kicking game here because it is an important part of the game. But first, before we get into the list here, as we always do, let's define what a blue chip and red chip kicker is. So what is the criteria, in your opinion, Michael?
Well, I think it's a guy that can make pressure kicks, and he's got incredible accuracy. I think to be a blue chip kicker in the league, I think you got to be high. I think you got to be in that 90 percentile. You got to be able to make kicks at a high level in bad weather, good weather. It doesn't really matter, and you got to make pressure kicks. Like Vinatieri is a Hall of Fame kicker because he's had Hall of Fame kicks. I mean, look, I can still see it. It pains me. It freaking pains me to no end. But when he lined up to kick that field goal to send the game to overtime in the Tuck game,
yep.
I mean, it was a 1-iron. I thought Tiger Woods hit it, the damn thing. I mean, that was one of the greatest kicks I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah.
I don't know how the hell we didn't block it because I thought we could have blocked it. But he destroyed it. So to me, it's like the automatic sense of that kick and handling pressure and being able to do it year after year and having range on your kicks. And the other thing is when we look at kickers, we got to have a really good kicker that can onside kick. That's important. Does he have a multitude of onside kicks? You just can't have one. You got to have the ability to do that because you're going to need him to make a play there. And then the ability to really put the ball where you want it on kickoffs. For example, when Buffalo kicked off to Kansas City with 13 seconds, if you got a kicker that can put that ball and plop it high like the Phil Mickelson flop shot, right? And you can do that. That sets your coverage up. So there's all these elements that go into kicker that is just not making field goals.
How does the ability to do your job in adverse conditions factor into the evaluation? Because you mentioned the Vinatieri kick, which in my opinion is the greatest kick in NFL history. They're 40-something yards in a driving snowstorm. How does that factor into the evaluation when you break down these blue chip and red chip kickers?
It's huge. I mean, the kicker like Boswell, for example, he's kicking in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. That's a hard place to kick. Last year he was 95% on every kick. I mean, that's a hard place. The wind swirls. The weather's not very good. Where Koo was 95% kicking in Atlanta. Now, Koo also kicks indoors in New Orleans. So now he's got 10 games indoors. He goes to Tampa. That's 11. So and then he goes to Carolina, typically not bad weather. That's 12. So the chances he may kick in 5 bad games. But the problem is he may have to go to Green Bay to get to the Super Bowl and kick in that weather. And so you're always worried about that. You can say, well, you got to pick a kicker that can kick to where you play. True, I get that. But you also got to pick a kicker that can kick if you got to get out of there. If you got to go to Green Bay, or if you have to go to, New York, or you've got to go to Seattle and with bad weather, with the rain and the sleet, all that stuff, it is difficult.
Let's get to the red chips list here then, Michael, because you have 3 red chip kickers, and they are as follows. Nick Folk of the New England Patriots entering his age 38 season, his 15th year in the league. Then a couple of younger guys, Jake Elliott of the Philadelphia Eagles, age 27, his 6th year in the league. Then Chris Boswell, who you just mentioned, of the Pittsburgh Steelers, entering his age 31 season, his 8th year. But I want to start with Nick Folk because he's had a fascinating career, in my opinion, because I remember when he was a rookie for the Dallas Cowboys back in 2007. He was a Pro Bowler, had really good 2 years to start off his career. But then things went south in 2009, which almost made me think that this kicking position is more mental maybe than it is physical. It almost feels like sometimes some guys can get the yips. Is that kind of your read on this position here?
Yeah, I mean, the reason, look, he was, 93% of his kicks last year.
Yep.
He missed 3 extra points, which is shocking, and he didn't kick off. That's the other thing. But I think he's gotten better. He's become really, look, when they signed him, I don't think they felt like he was their answer. They had a young kid from Michigan who they signed as a college free agent, that looked like he had a chance. But no, it's so much mental, Femi. It's so much being able to endure the pressure, to be able to handle it. It is truly like being a pro golfer.
Yeah.
You've got to be able to make those kicks when you're lined up. You got to make the 10-footers in a playoff tournament. You got to make the 10-footer at the British Open. It's hard to do. And Folk, I think, has done it. Boswell, he was hurt last year. He played 13 games. It was shocking. He only attempted 20 field goals. He made 19 of them, 59 long. He's a good kickoff guy, not a great kickoff guy, but he plays in bad weather, and that really helps him. I mean, I think that's key. He's able to handle the bad weather. He's able to do the things he needs to do there. So I think he's outstanding. I really do. I think he's done a great job for them.
Boswell has been above 90% in each of the last 5 seasons, which is just insane as a kicker. Like, that's really good stuff there. I mean, if not for his rival Justin Tucker for the Baltimore Ravens, he'd probably be touted as the best kicker in the game with what he's been able to do at Heinz Field, or whatever they're calling that field now. Jake Elliott of the Philadelphia Eagles, he was above 90% last year, and this is just another blue chip player on an Eagle, or rather a red chip player, I should say, on an Eagles roster that's pretty talented.
And he's got range. I mean, this kid's got range with his kicks. He can make pressure kicks. I think he's done a really good job of doing that. I just don't think he's the same level as. I mean, there's so many good kickers. I mean, Jason Sanders in Miami is really good. I mean, Bucker at Kansas City, I thought he was certainly a consideration. I thought he didn't have the best season that he typically did have. He missed a couple kicks last year, which is unlike him. He's 92%. But I thought Elliott was at least a red chip player. Look, I think this Eagle team, in the news of Smith injury and knowing Dallas is going to struggle a little bit with their offensive line, and I think this Philly team is loaded for bear to take it over. I really do. Yeah.
No. Butker, you mentioned him. He is one of those guys to where I think he makes the hard ones look easy, and sometimes the easy ones look hard.
Yeah.
Just from when I'm watching him, it'll be a 41-yard field goal, and it's like, who knows where this is going to go. But then if he lines up from 56, it's right down the middle.
I mean, he missed 6 extra points, which is shocking, right? For a guy as good as he is, he missed 6 extra points. So I just think, it's a challenge. I mean, look, the kid in Seattle, Jason Myers, I mean, he didn't miss a kick last year. Didn't miss a kick. He was 24 for 24, 100%. But, I think he missed 4 extra points. Can you imagine that?
That's insane. It's just the extra point has really gotten into these guys' heads. Well, it really has. Let's get to the best of the best here. We're going to take another quick break here. We'll get to the best of the best with the blue chip kickers and also the blue chip punters, according to Michael. Okay, Michael, let's get to the best of the best in the kicking game, and let's start with the blue chip kickers here in the NFL, according to you. And we'll start with Daniel Carlson of the Las Vegas Raiders, entering his age 27 season, his 5th year in the league. And then you have Justin Tucker of the Baltimore Ravens, entering his 11th season. Evan McPherson, the sensation from last postseason of the Cincinnati Bengals, entering his 2nd season. Matt Gay of the Rams, and Younghoe Koo of the Atlanta Falcons here. But let's start with Justin Tucker, because he's a 5-time first-team All-Pro. I think if you polled 100 people on the street who watch football and you asked them who the best kicker in the NFL is, this is the name that they would come up with.
Yeah, I think when Tucker's unbelievable. McPherson, these guys make pressure kicks, and I think that's one of the things that when you watching them, last segment I talked about Boswell. He missed 4 kicks last year. I was looking at 2020 stats, but last 20 he didn't miss very many kicks. So to me, I think ultimately these guys, they handle pressure so well. I mean, when Tucker doesn't just make a field goal. It goes like if the field goal was like tucked in by 4 yards on either side, Tucker would still make most of them, right?
Yeah.
It's unbelievable how good he is, And McPherson, look, McPherson was the weapon of all weapons. You feel bad if you're a Bengal fan, because if they would have got anywhere near a field goal attempt, 58, 57, he would have made that. That game would have gone to overtime. So in doing research for this, I was surprised how good Gay was last year for the Rams. I mean, I know he kicks in a perfect setting, but he was really good. I mean, he was the 2nd best kicker in terms of percentage of field goals made. He was 32 for 34, 55-yard long one. He made almost every single extra point. He was outstanding in that area. So. And same thing with Koo. Koo was 30 for 30 on extra points. He was 93% on field goals. Both guys, I know they play indoors, and that really helps. But both guys are really good players. They're good, and they surprised me the level of how good they were. Riley Patterson at the kid that the Lions signed for 7 games. I mean, he was sensational for the 7 games they signed him for. Now, whether he'll continue that trend, I don't know. But I think ultimately when you look at it, like Joey. You talk about kickers that move around. Joey Slive, the kid that was in Carolina, he ended up being last year. He ended up finishing the season. He was on 3 teams. He was 92%. I think he was at the Saints for a little while. He was everywhere. But it makes a difference. It makes a difference. It makes me nervous about the Chargers. Do they have a good enough kicker? Are they going to be good enough? But when you look at the Raiders with Carlson, his ability to make pressure kicks was outstanding.
Speaking of pressure kicks, I want to get back to Justin Tucker, because he had one of the most memorable moments from the NFL season last year, the game-winning 66-yard field goal against the Detroit Lions, an NFL record, kisses it off the crossbar, goes in. I want to bet off of it, so that's why maybe it's so memorable to me, but just the fact that they were even willing to attempt that just goes to show you how good Justin Tucker is and how much of a pressure performer he is as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, they should have gotten. It should have been a 71-yarder, and he wouldn't have made it because there was they missed the penalty there.
Wasn't it a delay of game or something, or was it a false start?
Yeah, they missed that, right? They missed the penalty. Of course, in that game, Hollywood Brown had 2 touchdown drops, which maybe the game wouldn't have been there. So, look, I mean, one thing, that's the problem. Here's where the other problem comes in with these kickers. When you're playing Tucker or you're playing Carlson or you're playing a guy that you know going in the game, your strategy has to change as a defensive coach. Like, for example, the other night, Monday Night Football, the Giants were playing the Bengals. I think it was, or Sunday night.
Sunday Night Football.
I was flying from Tucson to Las Vegas, and I was on the plane and I was watching the game. And it's at the end of the first half, and the Bengals had the ball, and they got called for another holding penalty. And it was 3rd and 20. They got called for another holding call, and Daboll declined the penalty. Mm-hmm. When he declined the penalty, I think the kick was. Let me look it up here, Femi. I got 1 second here. I'll tell you. I want to be right on this. God damn it! I don't want to be wrong.
Well, it was interesting because I think a lot of people thought that he would go ahead and accept it and try to push them back a little bit further to try to get a stop.
This is my point. I mean, with McPherson. With McPherson over there, you have to almost say, okay, I'm going to push you. I got to take the penalty. And if they get, I'm going to give it exactly what it was here. If they get so many, they're not going to convert the first down, but if they make it an easier kick, then okay, I'll take it. But, the 2-minute warning, let's see here. It ended up being, It ended up being 1 minute here. I got to look through it.
No, I got you. I'll give you a little bit of time to look that up here because I think it is an interesting point to make just from a coaching standpoint of how these kickers can impact what you're doing out there on the field here. So it ended up being let me see here because I think I have it up here for you as well. It was towards the end of the second quarter, I believe it was. This is actually excellent stuff. So it ended up being a 31-yard field goal, it looks like. Or am I seeing this wrong? Anyways.
No, you're seeing it wrong. No, here's what it was. It was in the first quarter.
Yes.
They had a 3rd and 16 at the Giant 32. And there was a penalty on Smith holding. It was his second penalty of the night. They declined it. So now McPherson trots on and kicks the 50-yarder. If he takes the penalty, it's 4th. It would have been 3rd and 26.
Yep.
Now, he can't attempt that field goal, so maybe they get enough yards back in it. Okay, maybe they do. But my point of the conversation here is simply this, that when you're going against McPherson or Tucker or any of these guys, your strategy as a play caller, right? Your strategy as a play caller defensively is, I got to make sure I knock him out of field goal range. Or I can't give up that 5-yard check down on 3rd and 12 because that's 3 points.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to do, right? That's a hard thing to do. That layers into your calls. And these guys make a difference because when you trot Tucker out there now, he's making the kick. Like one of the situations in football we don't talk enough about is when the offense is backed up. Say Baltimore has pinned their opponent inside the 1-yard line, okay? And Cincinnati has the ball coming out. Well, if I'm Baltimore and I have Justin Tucker, every week on Friday, I am practicing that situation identically. Because here's what happens, Femi. Most offenses, when they're inside the 2-yard line coming out, they have about 5 plays. They're going to run fullback in the flat. They're going to run fullback belly. They may run a quarterback sneak. They're going to run a 9 route. They're not running their offense. They don't want to get called for holding, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to run, So you as a defense coordinator know they have a small sample size on their menu. If you make them punt from back there and you have Tucker or you have McPherson, you get 3 points. You're going to get 3 points. Yeah. Even if you're going, that's a 3-point play there where the defense helps the offense. And I think to me, that's one of that by having a great kicker. See, people in the analytical community will say, which makes sense, right? Well, the difference between Tucker 94.6% and, Hopkins at Washington or two teams, or Graham Gano at the Giants at 87% is probably one kick. Okay, I get that. It probably is. The difference is maybe two kicks. But there's a huge difference in how you call the game and how you score points. There's an eccentric value that goes into this thing that you can't measure with just looking at the numbers.
Yeah. No, it's the minute those teams like Cincinnati and Baltimore cross midfield, it's points. You can pretty much chalk it up. It's
Same
points.
thing with the Raiders. I mean, Josh McDaniels has got Carlson. He's going to try to, hey, we're going to get 3 points. He's going to make it. And if he doesn't make it, we're all shocked. And the other thing it does for you, too, it gives you a sense, because remember, a missed field goal is a turnover. So when you send Tucker out to kick a long field goal, or you send Carlson out, your chances of turning the ball over are lower. And it also is lower when you look at what are your odds on fourth down. If I go for this on fourth down and I got Tucker, like when we had Janikowski, he was a great kicker, but he wasn't a 90% kicker. And he had a strong leg, but it wasn't always reliable. So, you send him out there and you turn the ball over. It wasn't as good as it looked at times, where you didn't manage it. When Parcells had Chris Barr, he knew he couldn't make a long field goal, so he went for it on all fourth downs.
Yeah, that affects the way you call the game, especially once you cross over that 50-yard line. So those, just to recap, the blue chip kickers: Daniel Carlson of the Raiders, Justin Tucker of the Ravens, Evan McPherson of the Cincinnati Bengals. He was perfect, 14 for 14 in the playoffs last year. Matt Gay of the Rams, and Younghoe Koo, the NFL red zone legend of the Atlanta Falcons, because every time the Falcons get in the red zone, they ain't scoring a touchdown. You can try Younghoe Koo out there. Let's get to the punters here, Michael. And before we talk about the list, the criteria for a blue chip punter is what?
Net punting. It's net punting. It's not gross punting. It's not how far you hit the ball. It's can you directionally kick. Look, one of the guys that should have been the MVP of a Super Bowl was the Rutherford, the kicker for the Giants when they beat the Patriots.
Mm-hmm. Steve Weatherford?
Weatherford. He was sensational. I called him Rutherford. I mean, I knew he was a Ford. I didn't know whether it was rough or weather.
One of them.
I mean, he was sensational. I mean, he won the game for him. The Patriots starting field position, their average starting field position in that game, their best starting field position was the 24-yard line. You make an offense play on a long field, and you can directionally punt and pin them back. Again, if you pin them back and you can put the ball inside the 20, like the kid Dixon at Seattle, he's had 40 punts inside the 20. Plopped them in there. That's a long field you're going on. That's a long field. It's field position. It's, and when you have that, and I know people don't give a shit about their punter, I'll just punt it. And you can control the direction of where you're punting the ball, and you can control your coverage by doing that, and you can build your coverage into that. It's a powerful thing.
Yeah, if you can pin teams back, that affects the way that they call plays as well, because they're not going to do anything that's ultra aggressive when they're pinned in their back end. At least most teams are not going to do stuff that's ultra aggressive. Here's a list of blue chip punters, though. A.J. Cole of the Las Vegas Raiders, Brian Anger of the Dallas Cowboys, Michael Dixon, who you mentioned, of the Seattle Seahawks, Logan Cook of the Jacksonville Jaguars, and Jack Fox of the Detroit Lions here. So the Raiders have a blue chip kicker and a blue chip punter. But the punting game is interesting because we've seen the traditional Ray Guy style of punting, but now we're starting to see this rugby style of punting that's taken over the past decade or so. How has that kind of affected the punt game and made things a little bit easier for some of these punters here with that rugby approach?
Well, I think it allows you to put the ball in. Like, I believe that, the kid from Seattle, Dixon, is a rugby guy, or he's got whether it's an Australian football guy.
Yeah, he's Australian.
Yeah, I mean, so like to be able to pin that ball back and get, and not return it and make them start. I think he had 40 of them, and he had 40 inside the 20. I mean, that's what you're looking for. That's what you're looking for. And, you can't have that ability without kind of being able to control the football like those rugby guys can do. It's kind of amazing how they do it. They can spin it or work the ball around. It's pretty impressive. But again, you gotta have that skill set.
Do you know Brian Anger's claim to fame, the Dallas Cowboys punter?
No, tell me.
So he's entering his age 34 season. It's his 11th year, but he was famously picked in the 3rd round by the Jacksonville Jaguars back in 2012. And that is the pick that has gotten more ridicule than any other one because he was picked 5 picks before Russell Wilson, who went to the Seahawks at the time the Jacksonville Jaguars needed a quarterback.
Only a Cowboy. Yeah, I mean, look, obviously. See, you know what that story tells you right there? You know what that story tells you right there? They didn't know their own team. They thought they needed a punter more than they needed a kicker.
Yeah. It's just fascinating.
And that's the problem with the NFL. If you could sum up most teams' problems, is they can't evaluate their own team. They have no honesty when it comes to their own team.
In the 3rd
we don't
round.
need a quarterback. We don't need a quarterback. We don't need a quarterback.
We'll take the punter.
We'll take the punter. We need a punter more than we need a quarterback.
And it goes to what you just said about how teams should, if you don't have the quarterback and you're a general manager, you just keep taking chances. Imagine if the Jaguars took a chance on Russell Wilson. Instead, they wanted Brian Anger, who is a good player in his own right, made the blue chip list, but he's no longer in Jacksonville. Now he's with the Dallas Cowboys. And
you know what's amazing about this conversation is, so I'm in Arizona and I'm watching tape, and I love watching high school players. I love it. I just love it. It's hard for me when they start talking about the 2024 class. Like, these guys are sophomores, and I'm watching them on tape. I'm like, holy shit, these, like Dominic Rioli, the center from the Lions, his son, oh my God, he'll be the first pick in the draft. Just somewhere he's going to be the first pick. Just write it down now. See if you can get DraftKings to get you that odds. I mean, he's going to be the first pick in the draft.
I was going to say,
right?
when is he draft eligible? Like 2028 or something?
29, yeah. I mean, he'll be the first pick in the draft, right? So, I mean, I was like, holy shit, this guy's great. But what's remarkable about watching them is when you see these young players, is you go to, and I think the star ranking system is full of shit. Like, I think the whole star thing is crap, right? There's so many 3 stars and they have 5 stars. Like, if the guy, because somebody's grading these high school kids, so they put a grade on them. So all 3 stars look alike. Like, some 3 stars look like 1 star, some 3 stars look like that. That's a dumping ground. It's like a scout. When we first started getting to scouting, the 5 grade was the perfect, because you could be good, could be bad. And I put them right on the fence. Like, okay, I got it. They don't want to make a decision. So the 3 stars, like, the guy doesn't really want to make a decision. He just jumps. So it's loaded with a bunch of guys. So, I'm watching these 3-star. And then I go to see where these kids went, and where they're committed to for the 2023 recruiting class. Alabama takes 3 quarterbacks. Like, there's Alabama. They have quarterbacks. Like, they're still taking multiple quarterbacks. Clemson's taking multiple. Like, to me, that's what you have to do. Like, if you pay one, you got to take more. You got to keep going after them, because unless you get the perfect guy, you're never going to get it. Like, in pro football, I know you got 5 years with Trey Lance, but like I said this 2 years ago, Cleveland should have picked a quarterback. Like, you got to keep staying on it. Like, you got to evaluate. I mean, Al Davis made the defensive coaches watch every quarterback in the draft. Because if there was a quick change, he wanted us to know that, Bailey Zappi played at Western Kentucky, and here's what he did.
Yeah. No, that's the whole high school national thing. It's just tough to gauge because you don't know the competition that they're playing is a whole different thing. One guy who was a 3-star, though, Michael, was Baker Mayfield, and he was recently named the Carolina Panthers starting quarterback. We're going to talk about that next year on the GM. All right, Michael, final segment before we wrap things up here. We were talking punters in the last segment, and you brought up Steve Weatherford and his impact on that second Giants Super Bowl in this millennium. And I Googled Steve Weatherford just to see what he was up to, and Google Images shows a different Steve Weatherford from what we saw on the field. He is jacked, man. Like, this guy is ripped. I think he's a fitness model. He poses for magazines and stuff. He does not look like what he looked like when he played. I mean, this guy might be a weak side linebacker.
Shit, yeah,
now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Good for him. Good for him.
For the folks who are listening, Google Steve Weatherford and click on the images link, and you will see a different Steve Weatherford from what you saw.
Guy should have been MVP of that Super Bowl. He should have been MVP of that Super Bowl. I defy anybody to tell me he wasn't the most valuable. I mean, they gave it to Eli, but this guy won the game for him. I mean, without him, it would have been a different game.
Shit, he might win Mr. Olympia now at this point.
Look at that. Yeah, God bless him.
But let's get to the news and notes from around the league. And we saw that the Carolina Panthers named Baker
Yeah.
Mayfield their Week 1 starter after he beat out Sam Darnold in that competition. Matt Rule going with the former number 1 overall draft pick in Baker Mayfield. And I guess my question to you, because we talked about this when you were here in town and we were having some nachos over at the booth here at Circa. Did the Panthers waste some reps doing this quarterback competition? Or do you think they went about this the right way with Baker and Sam now eventually picking Baker 2 weeks out from the regular season?
I think they had to do it this way, right? You can't stand in front of your team and say Baker's the starter when he's never been there. So and it would be rude to Darnold. It would be not fair to Darnold to just begin. Look, Baker's pro tape is better than Sam Darnold's pro tape. I think Sam Darnold would admit that. So you had to let him go out and compete and see what happens. And if you're Matt Rule, you've got to weigh that pro tape in the evaluation too. So I think the team had a chance to see both players. I bet the team's confident that they can win with both players. But I do think what happens is if Sam turns it over early, there's the doubt that creeps into everybody's mind. I think they're better off starting with Baker, see how that goes. And, look, both players will keep pushing one another. I don't think there's a chance that this will end just because, that one guy. I mean, Baker didn't stay healthy last year. Sam wasn't healthy last year. I think it's important that you have the competition there, and I think it's important to stand in front of the team and say, here's the guy.
Is it fair to say that this is an uphill battle for Baker Mayfield and this offense, seeing that he didn't get to the team until July, so he missed all of the spring OTAs and minicamp, then he split reps of the ones in training camp for the first part of it, and now there's only a couple weeks left. Is this an uphill battle before we get to Week 1 when they host the Cleveland Browns?
No, I think it's actually easier now because now they'll streamline the game plan, right? So now they're going to go play Cleveland. They know what Cleveland wants to run. So now they've got 2 weeks to practice all the plays they're going to run in the Cleveland game, right? They know how they want to set up their formations. And all of a sudden, instead of having to learn the whole playbook, you're just learning the game plan.
Game plan, yeah. Okay.
And so when you do that, that really sets it up a lot better for you. I think he'll be fine. Look, the key for Carolina is they got to get production out of Robbie Anderson. They have to, right? Like you're paying him this money. He's your vertical outside receiver. You got to get some production out of him. And they got to keep McCaffrey on the field. They got to get production out of him. I think their offensive line's going to be better. I think Ikwani, the kid they drafted from North Carolina State, goes to left tackle. They put Brady Christensen in at left guard. The left side of the line's better. I think the right side of the line's better with Corbett and Moten. So, I think they're better there. Cam Ewing's now a swing tackle, not a starting tackle. They're better. Tremble can block with Ian Thomas on the line. They got to their players, their best players have to play better. That's pretty real. I mean, Robbie Anderson didn't play to the level that they paid him.
Yeah.
DJ Moore did. Christian McCaffrey didn't play to the level that they paid him.
Yeah, he didn't
play.
He
has to. He didn't play. Well, that's not playing to the level, right?
Yeah. If he can stay healthy, that's another dynamic to that offense. But like you've said, pretty much this entire offseason, this roster is better than people are giving it credit for. Now we'll see if they can get all these pieces to work in the same direction. Maybe they can be a frisky team out there in the NFC South. You were here in Las Vegas, Michael. You went to Patriots-Raiders joint practice. Any observations that you have that you'd like to share with us?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of observations. I mean, it was really a good practice. It was spirited. It was well done. The players were respectful of one another. There was no fights.
Thankfully.
And there was a lot of good work. I mean, just to see, from a guy that, when you're around great players, it's an education. To watch Devontae Adams work, to see how accurate Derek Carr is with the football and throwing it into tight windows, to watch Mac Jones, how he leads the team, to see all those things is important. Coaches, and now that people that watch practice for Twitter, they get so caught up in, this guy had a bad practice, this guy had a good practice, this guy's not very good. No, practice is not rehearsal. Right, you want to go out there and make mistakes. You want to learn about some of the young players and see what they do. And I think it was kind of a good way. I think the Patriots' offensive line is coming together. I think it's a work in progress. They need Trent Brown to be consistent there. I think they've got some really good running backs. I think Parker looks like he's a really good receiver, an upgrade for what they want to do. I think when they run their scheme and they game plan, I think that'll be helpful. And defensively, which was my concern about the Patriots, did they have enough team speed on defense? I think they have improved that. And their corner situation, I thought Jalen Mills was more safety corner. I think he's now more corner. I thought he played pretty well. Adams is, to me, Femi, when you watch him work, when you watch him practice, you watch the details in his route running, it's an education. It's really, if you want to become a better scout, watch great players practice, watch great players play. You learn so much from that. And it was really, for me, it was fun to see him. And I think going to the Raiders, look, I think the Raiders they've got to get their inside of their offensive line fixed. It's a work in progress. And, but they have some really good skill players. I didn't see Waller. He wasn't out there. He had something wrong with his shoulder or something. But, other than that, they're pretty good at the skill. I mean, Hunter Renfrow, is watching how hard Adams works, and I think that'll make him a better player.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up Darren Waller because I wanted to ask you about him. Like, is he going to be all right? Because Josh McDaniels was asked by reporters earlier this week, and he says that he's not concerned, but he also wouldn't commit that he would be playing in Week 1.
No, I think he'll be okay. I think I think they're going to err on the side of caution when it comes to this guy. Look, he's missed 2 years. He missed 4 games last year. He was hurt. Yeah. They need him. The guy only scored 2 touchdowns. When you're that big and fast, and you only scored two touchdowns in the red area, that's a problem. They need him, and he'll make them a better team. And I think they got to err on the side of caution with him.
Yeah, Waller is a blue chip tight end. When we did the tight end episode, and we talked about him among with Kelsey and Andrews and Goddard and the rest of the crew, they're Kittle in that group as well. So the Raiders really need Darren Waller, especially with him, Renfrow, and Adams can be a terrific pass-catching trio. Some sad news in the world of football. We saw Pro Football Hall of Famer quarterback Len Dawson passed away earlier this week at the age of 87. Famously played for the Kansas City Chiefs, won Super Bowl IV. Has the famous photo in the locker room at halftime of the Super Bowl where he's smoking the cigarette, which is one of my favorite photos from NFL history. But how will you remember Len Dawson, the Hall of Famer?
As a kid growing up here in Ocean City, we had cable really before cable was in. We got Philadelphia channels and we got New York channels. We got Philadelphia NBC, we got New York NBC. We got, so at 4 o'clock, I can remember seeing those great Chief teams. And, I was born in 59, so the year they went to the Super Bowl, they had some incredible, incredible players on their team. I mean, the Buck Buchanan, I wrote about him in my new book. Bobby Bell, Johnny Robinson, the safety. Before that, they had Emmett Thomas. I mean, this offensive line with Jim Tyre and Ed Buddy, they were so good. And Len Dawson, this is a league where Len Dawson is not really relied on. I mean, he threw, I think he had 26 touchdown passes in that Super Bowl season. He was 39 years old. But this Chief team that Lamar Hunt built is really remarkable because it was such a conglomerate of guys they had to beat the NFL for. And Lamar did an incredible job. But what I remember of Len Dawson is just a guy that was just really efficient and effective at what he did playing the position. And he had some really good players around him. I mean, and then obviously goes into the inside the NFL career. No one ever says, Rick Goslin, the great beat writer for the Dallas Morning News, who was in Kansas City at one time, he would say, look, there was nobody nicer than Len Dawson. And I know we have a friend of mine who's a huge Kansas City Chief fan. He wants to become the big daddy of the podcast for the Chiefs, although he says he doesn't complain. I'm sure they all complain. Nobody complains like big daddies. But, these Chief teams were so good. They were so good. There's so much talent that AFL presented, and Dawson clearly was one of them.
Yeah, he was AFL MVP in 1962. Super Bowl MVP in Super Bowl IV there, NFL Man of the Year, which is the greatest honor there in 1973. So an all-around just great person and great football player as the game of football loses another great one there. Len Dawson passing away at the age of 87. Hate to end it on a sad note, but, we want to celebrate Len Dawson's life.
Great life.
But yeah,
great
it's a
life.
great life, Hall of Fame life.
And the thing is, too, is when you look at these Chiefs teams and you see, some of the players that they ended up getting through the year when they finally were able to break through and win the title, and put Hank Stram essentially into the Hall of Fame. Because remember, when Hank Stram went to the Saints, he didn't win. The one thing I would like to say, Don Coryell getting in the Hall of Fame,
yes.
everybody, I think look, Don Coryell is a fabulous story. I wrote about him in my book. Don Coryell's winning percentage is 52%. He never won a title. To put Don Coryell in ahead of Clark Shaughnessy, and people say, well, Don Coryell, the forward pass wouldn't happen. The pass wouldn't happen without Clark Shaughnessy. Like, the pass wouldn't happen without Clark Shaughnessy, and he can't get in. You know, Parker from the Lions. It's funny. I'm at the Patriots practice. The Patriots are practicing against the Raiders. You know, we're going to run stars come on the field. The star is the slot corner in nickel defense. Buddy Parker started the star. He invented the nickel defense, not George Allen. Buddy Parker did. Buddy Parker invented the 2-minute offense. He can't get a sniff. He won titles for the Detroit Lions. He can't get a sniff. This whole system of going into the Hall of Fame is so ass backwards. Great respect for Don Coryell. Great respect for Dick Vermeil. Both those coaches that got in. But did Mike Holmgren not to get in? Mike Shanahan not to get in? Yeah. Clark Shaughnessy can't get a sniff. Buddy Parker can't get a sniff. I mean, these guys are going to be lost. The legacy of the game was because of them. And, you know, and I hope people will buy my book and read it and try to have some sense of it. We need desperately what's happened in the NFL is it's a political battle. It's not the best of the bright. It's who can argue the most and who can. There's so much back channeling. Are you going to vote for my guy? I'll buy that vote. I'll do this. Like, it's crap. Like, put a standard of excellence up there, you know. And I do it in the book. I have a criteria for the coaches in the book that you got to meet. Coryell didn't meet it. Vermeil didn't meet it.
Yeah. Well, people like Dick Vermeil though, so you know it's.
They love him, and I love him. His wine's tremendous. You know, it's great.
I didn't know he had a wine.
He's got a winery up there. He's tremendous. Okay. It's great, and he was tremendous. And people say, you know, he did a lot for the city of Philadelphia. There's no doubt. But the Hall of Fame should be something bigger than just that. It should be something that reserved for the elite. The elite of all coaches. It should be a standard of excellence. It shouldn't be easy to get in. And Coryell, he never won a title. Marty Schottenheimer won 200 games. 200 games in pro football. There's only 9 human beings on planet Earth that have done that. And he can't get in because he didn't win a title. But it's okay for Coryell to get in even though he's a 52% winning coach. Like, how's that make sense? Tony Baselli gets in the Hall of Fame. He plays 6 years in the NFL. But Sterling Sharp can't get in because he's only played 7. How are you? I mean, this is Warren Commission shit. This is like Warren Commission stuff. You're like, this is so ridiculous. You know, then the problem is nobody's going to the National Archives to prove the Warren Commission. They are now, but nobody's going to the history books to prove what's wrong about this whole system.
When you come out with your book, we need to have a separate episode just to talk about this, because I could go on for hours about this Hall of Fame stuff, because you've brought up some of the inconsistencies with the criteria. It's absolutely insane why some people get in and why some people don't get in.
Sharp has 65 touchdowns in 7 seasons. He can't get a sniff. You know,
it's crazy.
I mean, Drew Pearson scored 45 touchdowns. He's in. He had an 11-year career. He's in.
Yeah.
I mean, like, Sterling Sharp was one of the best players you had to go play against. The only reason he only played 7 years, he had a neck injury. What offensive lineman in the history of the NFL? Like, seriously, let's just, and I don't mean to pick on Tony Baselli. He's a wonderful man. None of this is personal.
And when he played, he was fantastic, but he didn't play long.
He's a Hall of Fame talent. He's not a Hall of Fame career. There's a difference there.
Yep.
There is a huge difference there. When you sit there and you look at some of what offensive lineman doesn't play at least 10 years in the league? Tell me. Like, who doesn't play 10 years in the league? You know? Yeah. Ron Yeri played 12 years in the league. You know, like some of these guys, they play long times. They always play. Dick Shafrat played 12 years in the league. He can't get a sniff. But you're going to put a guy in who plays 6, but it's okay. He plays 6. But Terrell Davis, he plays 6. But Sterling Sharp, he only played 7. You're not allowed to come in here, Sterling, because you had too short of a career. Are you serious?
Sterling Sharp's got to get somebody in there to go to bat for him, because that's what all it's turned into.
That's exactly what it is.
Yep.
It's all about who can argue the loudest. And that's the problem. Somebody was yelling for Don Coryell. Poor Buddy Parker. I'm the only one yelling for Buddy Parker. I'm the only one yelling for Clark. I have no relationship with Clark Shaughnessy. All I know is if you want to study coaching trees in the National Football League, you got to go to Clark Shaughnessy.
Yeah. This Hall of Fame process, let's leave it at this because I can go on for more, Michael, and we're running out of time. But when you come out with your book, we're going to do a separate episode to highlight your book and also to talk about the inconsistencies that we see in this Hall of Fame criteria. But that does it for this week's episode of the show. Michael, passionate, great stuff as always.
Thanks, Femi.
Man, this is a good episode. It was a lot of fun here. Thank you to our listeners. As always, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Thank you to DraftKings. Thank you to VSiN. Thank you to you, Michael, and to our producer, Stephen Bond, with us as always on the ones and twos. And we will talk to you guys next week. Thanks for watching the GM Shuffle with Michael Lombardi. And for more videos like this, make sure to subscribe to VSiN Live and the GM Shuffle podcast with Michael Lombardi, presented by DraftKings and VSiN, wherever you get your podcasts.